Hello everyone, welcome back. In the previous video, we had left our auth provider.dart class in this state where we had finished up the logic inside of our try block, and now we're going to address the logic inside of our catch block. So inside of our catch block, this means that while authenticating our user, we were unable to authenticate him. What we're going to do is that we're going to set the status to status and auth status dot error. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to display an error. So I'll just keep this here. And then what I'm going to do is that once all of this function has been executed, either the try or the catch block, at the end of our function, we're going to notify our listeners as to, oh, something changed. Okay, so now that we have the basic login user with email and password function completed, what I'm going to do is to explain to you what notify listeners is. So what notify listeners is going to do is that anything that is going to be listening to our auth provider for any changes that are happening inside of this class, every time we call notify listeners, the auth provider class would tell the class that is listening to changes to this class that, oh, something changed inside of me. So re-render yourself or do whatever logic you want to do because, oh, something changed inside of me. And that's all that a notify listener does. In the actual pages that are going to use this logic is going to become more apparent. Okay, so with this, what I'm going to do is do command save. And now what we can do is we can go back to our login page. And then what we can do is we can go to the top and we can import firstly the provider library. Then we can do just command save to make sure everything is good. Then after we import the provider library, what I'm going to do is actually import the provider class that we made. So that's going to be / providers and then the auth provider.dart. Okay, so once we have that, the next thing we're going to do is that we are going to go to our email text field and password text field and actually add the logic into them so that every time you add a value into them, that value is actually saved and we can access those values. So for that, what we're going to do is that we're going to go to the top of our login page state class, and then we are going to define two new variables. One is going to be a string email, and then the other is going to be a string password. Then we're just going to do command save. We're going to go down to our email text field, and then inside of our onSaved function, what we're going to do is that we are going to do set state, and then we're going to take the email variable and we're going to assign it our input, and not input form, sorry, the input that we get in from the function, so underscore input. And then we're just going to copy this function, and similar to our onSaved function for our email text field, for our password text field, inside of our onSaved function, we'll do set state, and then we'll assign underscore password, the input we got, and then do command save. Okay, so now that we have this, the next thing we can do is that we can go to the top of our login page UI, and underneath of our return container, or on top of it, what we're going to do is we're going to print email and we're going to print password. So every time that the widget tree is re-rendered, we'll print the email and password. And now that you can see that for now they're null and null. Okay, so now that we're printing the email and password and they were null for now, we are now going to actually save the input that we get inside of our email address and password address, because where do we call these onSaved functions? So well, the way we're going to do this is that inside of our form widget and the onChanged function for that, we are going to go to the form key, and as I told you that the form key is going to save the current state of our form, so we're going to access the current state and then we're going to save it. So now every time we do form key.currentState.save, all of the children inside of our form, which are text form field or widgets that are of type form field, they have the onSaved function. The onSaved function is going to be called, set state is going to be called, and the email is going to be then updated to the input value, and the password is going to be updated to the input value. So now if we do command save and we click on here and we do this, you're going to see that as we type, it gets changed and the email gets updated. And for the password, as we type, it gets changed and the results are printed to the console. So this tells us that, oh, everything's being saved. And the last thing I would like to address is that we can add any gibberish into our email. We can add any gibberish into our test, and it actually doesn't give us an error, as you can see. And it just considers this gibberish to be a valid email. Well, for that, what we can do is that for our email text field, we can have a validator function. And this validator function, what it can do is that it can have logic inside of it that can validate if the input given is actually valid or not. So in the case of our email, we're going to have a pretty basic validation test. And that is going to be that you're going to return something. And if the input.length is not equal to 0, and the input dot contains the @ sign. So we check if the input's length is greater than 0 and the input contains an @ sign. And if that is the case, then we won't return anything. So we'll let the validation check pass. Else we'll return, please enter a, and I don't want to capitalize everything, so please enter a valid email. And the statement with a semicolon, do command save. Then what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to go to my password validator function, and I'm just going to return nothing if the input.length is not equal to 0, so that we add a password. And then what I'm going to do is that if the input.length is not equal to 0, that means we entered something. I'm just going to return nothing. Else I'm going to do is that please enter a password. And do Alt-Shift-F command save. Okay, so even now we can enter any gibberish and it'll still be saved, but this is where the cool stuff comes in. Now inside of our login button, before we actually use our auth provider and provide it with the email and password, what we're going to do is that we're going to make sure that the data is valid. So I'm going to do if, and then we're going to access the same form key, which stores the state for a form, and we're going to call the validate function on it. And what this is going to do is that the corresponding form, all of the children inside of it of type form field are going to have the validator function called on them, and the validation logic inside of them is going to be run. And if all of the stuff passes and no errors are returned, then the if statement is going to be true, and we're going to call the internal logic, which is login user for now, and then Alt-Shift-F command save. So now if we reload the app, just to show you, and I click on login, it gives me an error saying please enter a valid email, please enter a password. I don't like the inconsistency between how I wrote these errors and a full stop here, so just do this and click on login, and look, it says please enter a password. Now if I enter some gibberish and for the password I type in something, you're going to see that the password does pass the validation test, but it says to us please enter a valid email. As soon as I add an @ sign, click login, everything passes, and now it's inside of our if statement. So if I do print valid stuff, do save, keep an eye out here, I click on login, it says valid stuff, I remove this, I click login, it doesn't log anything to console, I add the @ sign again, click login, valid stuff is logged again. So with that, I think I'm going to end this video here, and in the next video we are actually going to link up our login page to our actual auth provider. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one.